Hey, sixth graders, Mr. Lee here. I'm introducing our first official unit of study. Got to role play with me here a little bit. So picture it's summer break. You're playing soccer with your cousin Tito. It's hot, you're sweaty. So naturally, you go inside for a glass of water. When all of a sudden, crash goes the bay window. A soccer ball flying through the living room. Of course, your mom comes flying out of the kitchen, wondering what in the world is going on. Quickly say, "It was Tito. I'm in here getting a glass of water." Mom, of course, calls her sister and says, "Tito smashed the window." Hold to the truth that Tito is the one out there. You accuse Tito of smashing the window. What actually happened was your neighbor Lisa came over, booted the ball right as you were coming in, and it was her fault. No harm, no foul. Lisa has to pay for the window. Tito's off the hook. And your accusation of Tito breaking the window kind of passes by quickly. But if you lived in the time of ancient Mesopotamia, you could have been subject to the third code. The third code was one of many laws known as Hammurabi's Code of Law. It had a series of laws, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that gave justice and that the people were subject to who lived in the land of Mesopotamia, specifically in the city of Babylon. The third code says if you wrongfully accuse somebody of a crime, like you did Tito breaking the window, you will be sentenced to death. Well, thankfully, we don't live in the time of Babylon and Hammurabi. We do still have codes of law, whether it's the handbook here at school, laws when I'm driving on the road, workplace policies for your guardians or parents. Laws and rules are something that are important to our society. Now, we're going to get into social studies this year about maybe some of those rules within school or laws within our country that we don't think are very fair or just. We're going to talk about how we look at those and how we go ahead and voice our concerns. In the time of Mesopotamia, the Code of Laws was the first. Many other civilizations based their laws and codes on Hammurabi's Code of Law. Well, Mesopotamia is one of the first civilizations in world history. Now, there are other people living all over the world at this time, but we're going to be looking specifically at the geography of Mesopotamia and also some of the innovation and technology of that time. But I'm going to give you a little overview of what Mesopotamia is and what was important to those people back then. Religion was huge. They were a polytheistic civilization, meaning that they worshipped many gods. The kings, as far as the social structure, the kings were on top, government officials ran the government, but the priests were very, very important because of how influential the gods were to the Mesopotamians. Kings and priests weren't the only roles within the society in Mesopotamia. Merchants were very important as well. They traded along the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Those are the two main rivers that gave Mesopotamia their name, the land between the rivers. It was very fertile for the merchant. That's how a lot of people made their living and their livelihood. Scribes were able to write down and to record the laws in a language called cuneiform. It was the first written language. Unfortunately, in Mesopotamia, there were enslaved people as well. This sin, this atrocity is something, unfortunately, that happened in most of the civilizations that we will study this year. Women. In case you were wondering about their place in society, I have two words for you: arranged marriage. Yes, before they were even adults, the rest of their life and who they would spend the rest of their lives with, for 11 and 12-year-olds, just like our sixth graders, was set up by the fathers. They had no value outside of the home, and unfortunately, this again is all too common in our ancient world. And it's going to be much of the discussion that we have of the value that each of us bring, no matter our background or our preferences, when it comes to our study of social studies this year. War, constant war, was the fate of Mesopotamians year after year. The fertile land between the Tigris and the Euphrates was so important. It was important because fertile ground means it's easy to grow crops and farm. These small city-states eventually fought, and they fought. And the first empire established itself, known as the Akkadians. Well, Akkadians were taken over by the Babylonians. We've already talked about that king. That's King Hammurabi of the Code of Laws. He was taken over by the Assyrians taken over by the Chaldeans and Nebuchadnezzar the Persians conquered by the Greeks. We'll get to them after Christmas break. But why do I mention all these civilizations? Well, it's important to know that conflict has been a part of world history forever. Conflict is still, unfortunately, a part of our society today. So if there's one thing that you can learn this school year is to how to control that conflict, figure out how to come to a common ground, and not make the same mistakes that we've been making for the last 3,000 or 4,000 years. So welcome to the journey, the land between the rivers known as Mesopotamia.